It's the Direct Response Podcast. I'm your host, Travis Ketchum, founder of Campaign Refinery, here today, as always, with David Cartolano from Wealthy Inbox. Hey, man.
Hey, how you doing, Travis?
I'm doing all right, dude. Today, what I wanted to talk about was a little bit about trends. And I know that trends can feel like, a fading thing in the past. They ebb, they flow, and that's all true. But thankfully, history repeats itself. So we're going to talk about a few things that you and I are seeing in our respective sort of, views of the marketplace as it is in general with email, about things that are changing from, whether it be branding, style, choice, technical requirements, analytics decisions, all those kinds of things. So kind of break down where we see the state of the market as it stands right now, where it's going, and which things we think are going to be resilient over time. How's that sound?
Sounds amazing.
Cool. So, obviously, I think it's just sort of a little bit of pretext, if you're listening to or watching this video and you haven't listened to all of our other content, first of all, pause, go back and watch some of that. But anyway, I'm coming at this clearly from the email service provider sort of multi-vertical, multi-niche perspective, right? Where I think it's a little easier for me to see signal from noise because there's so much variety that the true trends stick out to me a little bit just because it's a little bit broader scope. From your perspective, though, you're more from the newsletter angle. And so while you still get a lot of variety of newsletters, that in of itself sort of allows you to zoom in and see what are some of the specific trends in the newsletter space that you would identify more readily than I would. So I think that would make the discussion fairly interesting.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. Let's hit some of the tech stuff first, because recently there was a lot of things around DMARC and DKIM and authenticating a domain. And if you're like, David, I have no idea what that is, pause the video, pause the podcast, go back and check out some of Campaign Refinery's other content on that.
Type in, what is DMARC Campaign Refinery into YouTube and go watch our video about DMARC.
Exactly.
It'd be great.
Exactly. But now recently there are some tech things coming up on the horizon, and that's something that I'd love to roll the carpet out for you, man, because that's your game.
Yeah. I mean, the nerdy stuff, let me push up my invisible glasses that I don't actually wear, much to my eye doctor's chagrin. But anyway, so I think it's fair to say there's sort of two buckets of technical things. Bucket number one is that we are going to continue to see a versioning and evolution of the existing protocols, right? So DMARC, DKIM, SPF, all of these types of things that are already in place and oftentimes required above a certain scale, we're going to see these continue to evolve iteratively, right? So what the major mailbox providers are trying to do is they're trying to plug the holes on the ways that these technologies, while good, can still be abused. You can have things like relay attacks and whatnot, sort of nefarious things that bad actors can do to still sort of slip behind some of that authentication stuff and wreck your world. It's sort of the equivalent to identity theft, right? Like having someone sign up for a credit card in your name. Like, yeah, it's authenticated because I was able to, hit the loophole. So you're going to see these continue to evolve, and you're going to see, maybe some configuration changes required to keep up with the iterative versions of all of those respective protocols. So just because something is set and done now does not mean it's going to be set it and forget it the same way that the first iPhone didn't have even a passcode on it. It was only swipe to unlock, right? You're going to see things continue to get, an improvement of their natural thing, right? And there was typing in a code, and then it was Touch ID, and then it was Face ID, right? All these things are just increasing levels of security for the same function. And so I think that's sort of bucket one. And so be prepared for that just because you did it once, just because did what you need to do for that one update, that one time, doesn't mean you're done there forever. The second bucket is really new technologies that extend your ability to further prove that you are who you are, further have control over your domain, and further build trust and authority with your recipients. So that's things like, even though it exists already, not many people are using it, which is things like BEMI, which is basically being able to have your logo show up next to, who you're from. And depending on the levels of BEMI that you go down, you may even have, little authenticated check marks, and there's time, effort, and money involved. And we've talked about that. We have a whole episode about BEMI if you want to go read about it. But BEMI and things like BEMI are going to be adding to the overall technology stack. So your base layer is going to continue to evolve, and the stack itself is also going to grow. So that is from the technology standpoint, as simple as I can lay it out, that things are going to evolve and build over time. And that's a good thing, in my opinion, because the more you can do to separate yourself as a real legitimate sender from the spammers who bought their domain yesterday, didn't put any content on their site, didn't do any authentication, and just want to, load up 2 million emails they bought off Fiverr and go, you want to look different than them for good reason, right? And so these are all net positives for high quality senders.
Yeah. And you're right about that. Like this sort of stuff, you can hire somebody to do it for you, or if you are more techie inclined and you know what to look for, and you can follow the guides that are literally available on the internet for free from, somebody that might own an email service provider, go for it. It really doesn't make that much of a difference. And I got somebody out of spam a while back, and he had a great domain. He was in business for 20 years, but because things weren't set up correctly, he looked like a spammer who existed for 2 seconds and decided to, send a ton of emails out of nowhere with the wrong technical specifications. And I turned to screwdrivers in a very rare case, because turning a screwdriver and you're out of spam, that's kind of like super 2022. Like now it's different, but it was literally the difference between saying all right, let's turn the screwdriver, test an email, boom, it's out of spam. So this stuff is important. It is nerdy as shit, and it's boring, and it's technical, and it's also the thing that separates you from 93% of the spammers out there who are too busy with dollar signs in front of their eyes compared to, actually caring about people. I don't know what spammers do.
But one of the great things about the technical stuff is, while it's nerdy, it is very binary, and either it is correct or it is not correct. Right.
Yep.
And so much of email and deliverability is this sort of man behind the curtain, Wizard of Oz sort of situation. The technical stuff, there are tools you can do to, hey, check my record. Does it look right?
Yep.
And if not, tell me what's wrong with it. And that is a beautiful thing, because it is very black and white about, did I do it correctly? The biggest question usually for most new senders is, I don't even know what needs to be there in the first place. What protocols do I need? What needs to be added to my domain in general? And then what does that even look like? That I don't know what I don't know stage is really the only kind of nebulous part. Once you have the sheet of items that is, I need to do DCAM, I need to do DMARC, I need to do SPF and BEMI, you have that list, this is what they look like, and then it's just go. It's just a matter of doing the dang thing, which is kind of refreshing in the world of deliverability.
Right. Yeah, man. So what sort of trends then? So other than the tech, and obviously we could go on about AI, but AI is, I feel always going to be a trend. But I'm talking other trends that you've noticed in your position. What have you seen recently that people listening could use, apply, should just be aware of, other than the tech? Sure.
So the aggregate thing that stands out to me as a platform owner and just being entrenched in the community of email in general is that the elite senders have always been really leveraging audience segmentation, recency of engagement filtering, and personalization as these sort of ways to shape and mold who they're sending to, and being selective about who the segment is. And the trend that I see is, those who are already doing that will be even more judicious in deciding when to drop people and drop them more readily. And that the people that weren't doing that before are going to have no choice but to do that. So they're going to have to start segmenting. They're going to have to start being selective about who they send to, for a couple of reasons. The number one reason is that mailbox providers care about that a lot, and the way that they, judge, jury, and executioner is all about how well is your email getting engaged with, and the very fastest way you have to turn that dial is using those filters I just described. And the second component is that while in most of the technology world, you think about, the price of a computer or a phone or whatever, if you look at historically adjusted for inflation, technology tends to come down a lot in cost over time. The interesting thing about email is, because of the increasing levels of security, increasing levels of authentication, increasing risk profiles to be able to what does it take to recover IPs that have been burned, and all these sort of sunk costs in the machine that makes email get delivered have become more complex and more cumbersome to manage. what we're actually seeing is in a lot of cases, the prices for email is actually going up over time, which is somewhat counterintuitive. And it's, of course, the actual servers running it are getting more powerful for the same amount of money. It's the fact that you need more people managing it, you need more services involved, you need more layers to that cake of what's happening behind the scenes, has the default outcome of increasing the complexity and cost to run the machine. And that rolls all the way down, just like a tax or a tariff or a markup, like it rolls all the way down to the consumer. And I think we're actually seeing an increase in, cost per thousand emails sent, because it is more challenging, more difficult, and more cumbersome to deliver that email in a really high quality way.
Yeah, I'm seeing that across the board, man. Across multiple different companies. Not going to name names, but yeah, the cost of email is going up, not down. And I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that in my space. I'm seeing that in internet marketing. I'm seeing that in, the newsletter space. That's interesting. That's really interesting, because email's so cheap. Like, it takes the same click to send one email that it takes to send 100,000 emails. But yeah,
The stuff behind the scenes is definitely different, and so
yeah.
Having that is not the leading. Like, if you're doing everything right in email, even if the cost of email tripled, you should still be plenty profitable. It won't.
Absolutely.
It won't. But the point is, it's not the number one line item that most emailers are worried about. But because it is something that's going to be creeping up, I think more senders are going to be more mindful about who they send to. And the really funny thing is that's actually going to force them to be a better sender in general, because they're all of a sudden worried about their cost, which will actually improve their reputation, which gets them better performance. And then that it becomes a virtuous cycle, even though they were worried about a line item that is 45th on their total expenses. But because now they're worried about it, they do things that make them a better sender, because it sort of forces the hand of better habits.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I just worked with a guy and we cut half his list because they were dead as a doornail. And it was beyond, and I know there's some people who are like, yes, a subscriber is never dead. And I'm not one of those people. I think when people aren't interested anymore, they're not interested anymore. And if you want to scrape the bottom of the barrel to see what you can get, great. It's just not my thing at the end of the day. If you could do it by text or different marketing channel, go for it. But email, if they're not opening, they're not opening.
I always tell people, treat it like your exes. If they're just not into you anymore, let them go.
Yeah, just let it go. Just let it go. Yeah, and there's so many opposing schools of thought, but if you're one of those schools of thought, then just disagree in silence, because we're not going to invite you on the show. So,
or to our platforms, that's for sure.
Or yeah. Oh my God. Cool. Yeah.
So what are you seeing in the newsletter space? Because that's like a very specific sub niche, of course, and I know you touch a lot of different verticals. And so what are you seeing from that perspective?
So what I'm seeing, the first thing that I'm seeing a lot of are bigger corporations investing more into smaller to medium-sized creators. And you're like, David, how do I know if I'm a small or medium-sized creative? A small to medium-sized creator. Well, if you have a list size that's only like a stadium big, then you're a smaller creator. And I'm not saying that in a condescending way at all. I'm just saying it by the numbers. There are people who literally send millions of emails like every day. And that's like the scope of what we're talking about. But what I've seen and heard from just me seeing this in my own newsletter ventures, in what other newsletter creators are working on themselves, is bigger companies like, again, trying to be like, not drop names, but companies that have B2B CRM systems, personal finance companies, brand names that used to just be on Facebook ads and Google ads and things like that. They're now starting to shift over into the newsletter space, and they're willing to pay, $2 a click, $3 a click to have you put their links and their ads in their newsletters. And the reason why, and this is my theory, I know another newsletter person that supports this theory as well. The reason why is they're realizing that there's first-party data and third-party data. And to put that in like regular English, I'm going to go to David, who has the direct list of contacts of people that I can target versus I'm going to give it to Facebook or Google and they have an abstract idea of the person from following them around the internet with cookies, which, you know, Google say they're gonna let them go and then they're gonna bring them back and they're gonna let them go and bring them back. And advertising dollars are shifting more toward the first party data. Now, it's not, I don't think it's the bubble that it once was, like a year or so ago, where people were just throwing money like crazy. Now, I think newsletter creators actually, and this is a trend, should actually be tracking, I don't know, the performance of a campaign for an advertiser and give it back to them. You know, don't just go for those like brand recognition deals. Like maybe, I don't know, treat their business like business. So that's something I'm seeing. I'm seeing more sponsorship dollars from bigger companies, not just B2C, but B2B companies start to flow into small to medium-sized creators that aren't necessarily in the B2B space. I'm seeing money shift in that direction. So that's one thing that I'm seeing a lot of. There's another thing on my mind, Travis, and it's gone. It's gone. That's it. It's out the window. So I'm trying to catch this mental boomerang.
Well, I know you talked in the pre-recording about, you know, basically shifting to personality-driven brands as well.
Right. Yeah. So personality-driven brands, that's something that I'm seeing more of, as any nitwit with ChatGPT can write an email. Like, it's easy.
In these challenging times.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think about what my great-grandfather had to do to get here from Italy, and now there's me, and I'm like, I can hit a button and write an email and send it to millions and millions of people. That's crazy.
And money somehow falls out of the internet as a result.
And it falls out of the sky. It's a beautiful thing. Now, that being said, because in my vertical of newsletters where anyone and everyone can start a newsletter, there's a lot of AI generated content out there, which is fine unless it's not. And most AI generated content sounds like AI generated content. Need I say more? So, I mean, for my newsletter, it is AI generated, but there is a human reviewing it, constantly updating the prompts and making sure, like, hey, is this the product that we are promising people when they sign up? So I think in the wake of all this, like lots of faceless brands popping up, I'm seeing bigger email service provider companies start to get celebrities, like A-list celebrities, to start their own newsletters. And there's been a lot of like, now I have opinions about that, but there's just been a lot of reach out to household names that you might have seen on a Netflix episode or a movie theater to get them to start their own newsletter. I think it's a buzzword. I think newsletters came back since they swung around in about 2020, and they're kind of coming back and rising up again. So it's just another rise in the tide. So I am seeing more people say like, hey, I'm going to be starting this newsletter, and they're taking their social media followings and starting to move them over to the newsletter space. So with all that mouthful, I think I'm going to say such a cliche, and I hate myself for saying it, but we are going to see more personality-driven marketing. We are going to see more influencer branding. That's something that popped up a lot with the advent of TikTok back in 2020, where you have regular people like waving shit at a screen and saying, buy this. That's not over. I think that's going to continue even more. As AI progresses, there's going to be an equal, with every reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And I'm seeing more need for people being attached to products than ever before. That's what I'm seeing. And look, you could take that and copy and paste that, what I just said, in any year of marketing ever. So that's why I said, I'm sorry, I'm like throwing up in my mouth while I'm saying this, but it is something to be aware of. If you are pushing products, use more testimonials, use more human faces, because I think words are becoming cheaper in people's minds. So that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, so I think sort of my takeaway from that is that the content is maybe, you know, a shrinking in its importance of value because content is easier, more rapid, and cheaper to produce. But who the content is coming from matters more because people, it's kind of like, you know, that old saying, it's you may not remember what someone said to you, but you remember how they made you feel.
Yeah.
And I think that marketing principle is applied here because people may not remember every single word that you're, you know, emailing them, but they remember how you, the sender, made them feel. And that's easier to get them to that state if they associate it with an actual person versus sort of this nebulous black box of a brand, right? Because even if you're using a pen name, that's at least something, right? Like it's not just, you know, from the team at Apple. It's like if you got an email, I know Johnny Ive isn't there anymore, right? But if it was like, if you got an email about the you know, the like, you know, man stuck in the white room video, and it was talking about like the design attributes and whatever about their newest product, and the email was signed from Johnny Ive, like that would hit a little bit harder, just a little bit harder than like, oh, that's from Apple about their new phone. It's like, Johnny Ive wants to like wax poetic about, you know, the radius of the corner and the, you know, the purity of the design or, you know, whatever the thing is. When it comes from a person, it has more emotion baked into it, even if it says the exact same thing.
Yeah. And that's a warning to faceless brands, which myself, I have one. So me being very aware of this, if I cannot attach a name, if I cannot attach a face, then that means the community must be attached to the brand. So that way it is not just like, it's not just this, like you said, this nebulous thing, because people buy from people. They really, really do. And that's the advantage that the small, medium-sized creators and I guess small, medium-sized businesses in general have over big corporations is that, like, you got, you know, you could get a drink at Starbucks or you could go to your favorite coffee shop and Joe's going to hook you up with a cup of his famous Joe. And it's like, yeah, I fucking love Joe. I'm more than happy to shell out an extra $3 for Joe.
And he does a latte art on top, and it makes me feel good about the whole interaction. And Joe's kind of my buddy, and I want to see him every day, and I want to support him, and I want to tip him in a little extra, as opposed to I ordered it on my mobile app from Starbucks, and I got it on a drive-thru.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's something that I'm seeing. So, you know, faceless creators and faceless brands, and I guess bigger brands. That's something. Just bringing more faces into your emails. And that's something that I'm figuring out and I'm doing as well. So I'm right in there in the trenches with you.
Cool. Yeah. So I wanted to hit on one more sort of like topic that I think actually has weight. And then I want us to talk a little bit about how do we figure out, you know, I like this term a lot, so I use it probably too much, but signal versus noise on all the rest of the stuff.
Oh.
Because we can just sort of do a lightning round of a generality and then like hit a couple examples. So the one that I think does have some weight to it is the concept of gamification, which can take several different forms. Gamification in the sense of training your audience to act and react a certain way. Gamification in the way that people refer your content to others. Gamification on how people sign up and get introduced to your brand. Basically, when I say that the global term of gamification, what I'm really saying is being more thoughtful about the ask and the reward for that ask that you insert into the pipeline of all the things you're asking your audience to engage with. And that is going to be more important because we are selfish creatures. A great marketer is always saying, how do I answer the why should you care? But if you break that down into little micro events, it's why should you care about clicking on this specific piece of content? Why should you take the effort to get one of your friends to sign up for my newsletter? Why should you care about the lead magnet I just sent you? Why should you care about the course that I got you into enough to actually finish it, right? Because the average completion rate on a course is only 3%. Most people are shocked when they hear that, but it's the gosh honest truth, right? So
I'm not.
When you think about that sort of like, you know, how do we get that dopamine process going? How do we stand out from the crowd? Once you have that technical layer, once you have that personality, then it's like, okay, how do we take it to be the cherry on top and make sure that every time that they're hitting one of our buttons, one of our links, doing one of our pieces of content, there is a reward, a little treat that they get for doing so. And the more you can introduce that into your stack, the more consistent your audience will be with doing that, and it shows you as a higher quality sender, so you get better placement and you get better click-throughs anyway, which gets you more traffic to your sales pages, and the whole thing runs a little smoother, a little nicer. And I think that trend is going to creep its way into more and more aspects of the way that we market, whether it's email or otherwise, but specifically in email because it's so trackable and you can so directly link an outcome to an action. I think that we're really going to see that take off over the next few years. I don't know how you feel about it.
No, I think gamification is a more rewarding and euphemistic way of saying, micro commitments, getting people to say yes, to take certain actions that benefit you, benefit them, hopefully at the same time, right? But yeah, that is something that I see. That's something I've seen actually with a couple of newsletters as well. It's like when you sign up, if you do X, Y, and Z for us, we're going to give you A, B, and C. That's a flow that I recently just entered, and I'm like, I really like that. I need to figure out how to implement something like that. Because that faceless creator. So that means like I got to pull the levers I can pull without using my pretty blue eyes and curls in order to do it, So yeah, that's something that I do see.
Cool. Now, I want to kind of just briefly touch on, like, super fast, a couple of the little things that I tend to think are more noise than signal. And I want to use them as examples because here's the thing. As you're sitting there and evaluating any marketing channel, especially email, it's easy to feel overwhelmed about all the things you, quote, need to be doing, right? You need to be doing this, you need to be doing that, you need to be using AI like this specific way, you need to be doing this technology stuff, you need to be writing in a certain way. And it's easy to feel so overwhelmed that you don't do any of it. And so you have to pick what is the highest value lever I can pull. And if I chase this long tail thing, maybe I have the bandwidth for it, maybe I can assign someone on my team to do it for me, maybe it will bring me a little extra squeeze, but it may also just be me having the satisfaction of writing that to-do list and ticking off the box more than it does actually moving the needle for the business. And some examples that I think of as you think about, for a while, people were really hot about the idea of Google AMP, which is this like super streamlined, super flattened, way to get email into the inbox. It was super thin and light and would, in theory, have a really high performance mobile experience. And the train of thought was if you do that, then you get rewarded with, enhanced placement, whatever, right? But my lens that I use to evaluate is something like that worth it, is how many asterisks are required for that ideal scenario to matter at all. And then even if I meet all that criteria, does it matter enough? And if both of those questions can't be answered, then it's probably not worth your time, effort, money, resources, all those things to be chasing that long tail. Another example that I feel fairly strongly about is that most people should not care about dark mode emails. Okay. Like, it's sort of a funny thing that people like to throw around in the software world about like, the if we add dark mode to our app, we'll double our user base. And it's like, well, that never actually happens. It's a nice to have feature that, probably a single digit percentage of your users even notice, let alone care about. And so I think the same thing is true. People are used to saying white background, black text, or if not black, very, very dark, and, images, and it gets all the contrasting right. And if you allow it to flip into dark mode, you're chasing all this optimization for, well, do I need to invert my colors when it's in dark mode? But that doesn't quite look right, so I have to pick a whole different palette for it. The spacing looks funny when the background's black instead of white. Like all the dynamics of how you design and optimize for it change. You're like, well, why am I doing that? What percentage of users actually have a dark mode setting that changes my email to dark mode that is actually an improvement in experience? Those people exist, but I'm arguing that it's probably a fringe, right? And so as you go through all these different things that you hear about, or over the next few years or whatever, apply that filter to those events and say, does it matter? Does it have a lot of asterisks? And even if we get past all those filters, will it actually make a meaningful difference in what I do? Or is it just a cool, shiny thing that I want to tick off of my list? And if that is the case, I would argue you could skip it and you'd be better off emailing your list twice as often.
Yeah. No, seriously.
Yeah.
Seriously. Yeah. I love that. It's like, does it actually matter? And that's similar to my way of thinking. I haven't been in digital marketing nearly as long as you, Travis, but in the time that I have been, which is going on years and years at this point, when I see a new flashy thing come up and everybody loses their mind about it, I first take a look at who's promoting it. So like, if it's the same type of people who are promoting this as the next new thing, and they also a year ago promoted the next new thing that didn't become the new thing, and it's coming out of their mouths, I'm immediately skeptical. I'm like, let's see if this thing has, like, this ain't a car yet. This is a bike, and it's got the people who typically ride with training wheels promoting it. So I look at the who, like, who's actually pushing this? Is this like just another trend that trendsetters, quote unquote, want to push so they can sell you something? So it's that. It's also, I like looking at the principles behind something. Like, is this principle going to hold up in 10 years? And if it doesn't, then yeah, it's a flashy thing, which flashy things work, and there's nothing wrong with that. But flashy things are distractions from like what's actually important. And I can tell you from looking at different newsletters and wanting to acquire a couple of different newsletters, but saying no and talking with enough sellers, there are people that will believe like, oh, well, my newsletter has this like flashy thing. I don't care. I don't think any other investor would. Why? Because it doesn't help grow the business. It doesn't help connect to the customer. It's just a flashy, shiny thing that probably already existed in another form. So I think like boiling it down to the principles versus like, is this a principle-based thing or is this a tech flashy-based thing? And does it contribute to like actual revenue? Does it contribute to actual customer experience? And you know, who's peddling it on a street corner? Like, is this like, let's look at the who behind the what and make our decisions from there. So that's my way. And I am a very skeptical New Yorker. I get it. I'm more likely to say no than I am yes, but I found that has really helped me out in my life, not just in business, but also personally. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt. I'll stay with the stuff that works well over the new stuff that claims to work better if it doesn't actually work better after like a year of people talking about it. So
yeah, I mean, another way to look at that too is if you instead took that effort to email your list more often and then ask yourself, did anyone complain that I didn't have that thing that I thought I was going to add, right? Like the fact that I didn't have AMP, that did anyone even notice? The fact that I didn't optimize for dark mode, did anyone even notice? No. And so instead of the time you could have burned doing those things, why don't you spend that time actually producing more compelling content about good offers that your audience cares about and send it to them and see what happens. And I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised.
Yep. I cannot tell you, I've known maybe, I keep meeting these people who are small, medium-sized business owners. Maybe they're the only people working in the business and they've been doing the same damn thing for 20 years. They've had their email list for like 10. They haven't changed too much. They're still around and their emails are terrible and they're making a lot of money. So trends come and go, but I think the principles of business and marketing that you can find like literally anywhere, those are the best teachers.
Cool. Well, you know, this is a longer episode than we normally do, but I think it was well worth it. I hope that the listeners got a few things out of this that they can sort of take their notes and go home and scribble about a few things that they need to pay attention to and maybe strike out a few things they don't need to care about anymore. That would be ideal. Now, this is an ever-changing thing. Trends are that way by nature. So thankfully, we have a wonderful content team. So you actually see, if you're watching this video a year down the road, 2 years down the road, check out the link down below because that very good chance that the article that links all the trends, whatever, in more specific detail is updated to be whatever the current deal is, and the same rule applies, the things that matter, the things that don't. And if you are looking for a great way to send that email, Campaign Refinery is obviously the email service provider that we built based on our principles. I highly suggest you check it out, see if it's a good fit. If it's not, no worries, but give it a look and have it in your matrix of considering platforms. And David, what's the good word?
Yeah, if you're interested in just this whole newsletter stuff that I talk about, you can go to wealthyinbox.news and check out the blog / newsletter / whatever the heck I'm going to call it in the future. You could check that out. I talk just like that on that blog, and yeah, it's just my journey on how I'm doing the thing I'm talking about.
Cool. Oh, I highly recommend you check it out. And I hope you got some things of value. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon.